Hello, my name is Caroline CSowards, and today we're going to talk about how we can use statistics and research methods to decide which kind of Halloween costume to wear. So the research question here is, does the type of costume affect how much candy is gotten by a trick-or-treater? In this study, we have to first decide on some variables. Our independent variable in this research study is the Halloween costume, and this variable we're going to have 3 levels of. So 3 kinds of Halloween costumes are going to be used in our research study. Classic Halloween costumes like witches and ghosts and vampires. Scary Halloween costumes, really gory ones. And character Halloween costumes like superheroes. Our dependent variable in this research study is candy. So that means we're going to see the difference, measure the difference in the effectiveness of these Halloween costumes by weighing the candy that each trick-or-treater gets in pounds. So to do this, we're going to have 30 trick-or-treaters, 10 wearing classic Halloween costumes, 10 wearing character Halloween costumes, and 10 wearing scary Halloween costumes. But we need to control for some other variables to be sure that any difference in the amount of candy between these costume types is really due to the costume type worn and not something like age, gender, the neighborhood and route, or the time of trick-or-treating. So we're going to send these trick-or-treaters out at the same time, tell them to go through the same neighborhood, use the same route, and we're going to make sure that each group of trick-or-treaters, is about the same age range and has the same makeup of gender. So we get the trick-or-treaters back, we weigh their candy, and we sort the data. So what does it mean? How do we know what this data means, and how do we know if there's a difference in the amount of candy that each type of costume resulted in, and if that difference is meaningful? We can use a test called the analysis of variance. Remember, an analysis is like a test or an investigation or study, and variance means difference. So we're testing the difference between the effectiveness of Halloween costumes. And we can use a computer program called SPSS to do that. So we put our data into SPSS and we get some results. SPSS gives us the averages of the amount of candy that each costume got, or the mean. So we can see that the classic type of costume resulted in more candy than the character, which resulted in more candy than the scary costumes. But how do we know if these differences are really meaningful enough to change the amount or change the type of costume that we want to wear? To do that, we look at the significance values and the effect size given to us by SPSS. So in the sig value column, we're looking for a number at 0.05 or less, and we see that it is in fact 0.05 or less. This tells us that we can be reasonably confident that 5% of the time or less, we are seeing a difference in the amount of candy each costume type gave us due to an error that we've made or some other reason. So 95% of the time, we can feel confident that the difference is due to the costume type. And we look at the effect size here is 0.201, and that's a pretty large effect size. So now we know that the difference found was statistically significant, but how do we know which costume type was actually the best, and was it better than all the others or only one? So to look at that, we look at the multiple comparisons the SPSS gives us. Again, we're looking for a p-value of 0.05 or less, and we only see that when comparing the classic costume with the scary costume. So what this is telling us is that the classic costume is statistically better than the scary costume, but not necessarily better than the character costume. We can better understand this by looking at charts and graphs that SPSS gives us. In this case, we get a bar chart, and this bar chart shows us that the classic Halloween costume resulted in more candy than the character type of Halloween costume or the scary type of Halloween costume. But we know from looking at our significance values that really only the classic type of Halloween costume was statistically significantly more effective than the scary type. There's really not a meaningful difference in the amount of candy you would get if you wore a classic versus a character type of Halloween costume. In this hypothetical study, you might decide to go with either.